Hi folks, today we're talking about flat lay photography, particularly for artists on Instagram. And these are tips that I have been using for the past few months when I've been photographing my work, and I've seen a real improvement not only in just the feed of my Instagram but also in the number of followers that I've got and the amount of engagement that I've had with my posts. So I wanted to pass some of that on, and without further ado, let's get on with it. So the first tip I have is thinking about colour. Something I like to do for this is pick out a single colour from the image and try and expand that into the flat lay at large. So for this one here, I've taken a single colour. You've got that gold, which is nice and bright and yellowish. So I've gone with the yellow theme, and I'm trying to include as much yellow in there as well. If you're just starting out with doing things like this, keeping the colour scheme really simple is a very good idea, unless you're really wanting to be very bold and out there. So you've got a rainbow colour design and you want to really emphasize the colourful nature of it. So tip number 2 is playing with texture. Now there are lots and lots of different things that you can use for backgrounds or for just objects on top of or around your image. You could use maps, brown paper bags, coasters, fabric, clothing, bubble wrap, scarves, even old socks. I mean, these are just things that I found around the place. Be creative with it and see what sorts of things you have lying around. Tip number 3 is all about composition. Now, you've spent a long time really focusing on the composition of your piece, I'm sure, and it would be a shame for that to be ruined by a bad composition around the outside of your image. So just think about where you're placing the objects. You probably don't want them all to be bunched up on one side, and you probably don't want them to be too uniform either. I find that just playing around and seeing what's working and what's not tends to be the way to go. And for this image that you're looking at right now, I didn't actually go with this composition in the end. I actually went with a much simpler one where I just had some leaves around the outside, which worked very, very well. Tip number 4 is thinking about form. So if you've got a lot of circular forms within your image, such as with this one here, I would consider using objects around it that also have that shape in it. So whether it's a circle or whether you've got lots of straight lines or whether you've got lots of dynamic angles, then I would use that to compose the objects around your image. So with this one here, I've got some lovely shells, some sea urchin shells, which are echoing the shapes within the composition. And likewise, I've got a bowl here with lots of little things in. That's another little tip, is using things like trays or bowls or bigger objects to put smaller objects in, just so that they don't look quite so random. And with this one, I've added in a background, a white piece of tissue paper, because I wanted a bit more contrast between the image itself and the background. And if I put this straight onto the dark wood of the desk, then it would have got a little bit lost, I think. Tip number 5 is lighting, and there are some super easy tricks to improve the lighting in your pictures. What I do is I shoot during the daytime. So I shoot next to a window, so I've got light coming in, directional light from one side. And what I do is I use a mirror and I place that on the opposite side and reflect the light coming in from the window so that it's nice and even from both sides. Now, you don't have to use a mirror for this. You could just use a white sheet of paper. It doesn't work quite as well as a mirror, but it can be very, very effective. And I'm just going to demonstrate how these all sort of work together in this image here. So I was looking at the color that I had on the image. So I looked for objects that also had gold in, and I also looked for objects that had those kinds of tones in them, so quite neutral, nothing too bright and loud that was going to detract from the image. I also used a textured background. It is again a piece of tissue paper in behind, and that's just to have that contrast between the image and the background. I've also used these round shapes which go nicely with the image itself and the artwork, and then the straight line of that book sort of echoes the straighter lines of the edges so that it wasn't all too uniform and all too round. Sometimes throwing in something a little bit different is quite handy. So those are my 5 tips, but I do have a bonus tip, and that is sometimes it's just better or easier or more effective even just to keep it simple and stick with one single image to just enhance your artwork, like I've done here with the Mary Poppins design. If you want to find me elsewhere online, I am at Holly Dunn Design on Instagram and Twitter. My website is hollydundesign.com, and I have an online shop on there as well where I sell prints and I also sell cards. And at the end of October, all of these Inktober drawings, the Ex Libris ones that you've seen in this video, will be available for sale as well. So if you're interested in that, head over there. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will hopefully see you on the next one. Bye!